look, I've had a really fantastic opportunity to learn from some of the best organizations in the world around many, many things. And having been an interim for the last sort of 12 years or so, I've learned a huge amount in different industry sectors too. And ESG for me is really, really important. And it always has been, but we've not really talked about it or thought about it. We've just got on with it. And I think now is the time to put our foot on the ball and consider what we do next. So I'm delighted to have the conversation. Fireside chat is one thing, as long as the fireside bit and the burning bit is sustainable. I'm happy with that, David. but let's see where we go, right?
Look at that. That's even a very, very good, very good segue. I like what you've done there. So from my side, again, having spent the last probably 12 months championing the sustainability agenda, right, for procurement heads, I've had a number of roundtable events with closed sessions with CPOs from different parts of the world with different organizations. And one thing that's come out of those discussions for me has been that sustainability in its broadest sense is a really key topic, right? It's a key topic for those individuals. It's a key topic for people when they're joining a business.
Yeah.
But actually, the sustainability policy is far broader than some people think. And I think the ESG element is a really good way of breaking down what that means. And it means so many things to so many different people. It has such a broad impact, right, that we could be sitting here for probably the next 20 years chatting about each one, right? So from my side, I guess the first question I've got for you is, how can procurement and supply chain drive ESG to be part of that company's, makeup and fabric?
So as I just mentioned earlier, David, ESG has been around for quite some time and never been framed as the three pillars of environmental, social, and good governance.
Yes.
And before we get into the procurement opportunity and the supply chain opportunity, I think for me, everybody gets up in the morning, and I'm a strong believer in this, that they try and do the best they do with what they know.
Yes.
And there are some things to me where we're human beings rather than human doings, right? So for me, this whole thing around ESG is about creating a way where we move from doing stuff to actually being about ESG.
Absolutely.
And that's really important because we can, as a consumer-driven society, we often just assume we just get things, clip our fingers like this, and it happens.
Yes.
Naturally, the supply chain that goes across that end to end, there's a cost in environmental, there's a cost in social, and a cost in governance. And so for me, there's a bit that says, okay, how do you educate the audience to get to a good outcome? And I think for procurement supply chain, uniquely positioned in the organization as a helicopter.
Yes.
Start to see and start to point and prod about how you bring that together. And I think that it starts with, you've got to start somewhere. So start small for me and start to consider what have you done so far across those three pillars?
Mm-hmm.
How can procurement have the conversation in the right way? And this is about framing it in such a way that you make it part of the decision-making process.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then it becomes very conscious then around, let's just say, typically when procurement may have gone to market previously, there'll be a particular reason why you go for a particular way, which is around cost.
Yes.
Now, for me, reducing cost clearly is how we've been measured in the past, but actually total cost and true cost in the context of ESG is really important.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Now, for me, this is like running a global transformation program of the biggest scale when you start to consider that everybody's got to get with the program, whether you're a consumer business, a professional services organization. It takes many of the dominoes to fall together to create the right ecosystem. And so if you go early, then you could see an impact which is less than favorable.
Yeah.
But if you go together and start to think about there's plenty to play for and to collaborate, I think that's a really good place to be.
Yes.
We're seeing a lot of this now with the sustainable pledge and procurement and CPOs getting together. But I think we're at a tipping point and a pivot, which is a really powerful one. So I come back to answer the question. I think it's being bold. I think it's being clear though what ESG means. And I think it's then about saying, okay, so what are the baby steps that we would do across those three pillars? And starting with environmental, because that's kind of the one that everybody knows.
Absolutely, yeah.
Almost one where you can go, guys, let me just explain to you now, when you have a piece of paper, where that comes from, and what's involved in that, and the true cost of that from a people perspective and from an environmental perspective. So I think we're uniquely positioned to start to tell the story.
So quick question on that then, Andrew, right? So where you've operated historically and you've been involved in promoting the ESG and sustainability piece, right? Who owns that agenda? Because is this something which is pushed down from the board, right? Or is it something which is proactively developed from within and pushed up to the board?
So I guess there's a couple of answers I can give to that.
Yeah.
Right? Different organizations have different degrees of maturity and different aspirations and ambitions to want to be a leader or maybe a follower within ESG.
Absolutely, yeah.
There's no right or wrong answer.
Absolutely.
However, there are some very enlightened procurement supply chain leaders.
Definitely, yeah.
That would go, hang on, let's just stand in the result here and examine why we've made that decision. And does it satisfy for the longer term? Does it make the right impact?
Yeah.
And then I think sometimes it takes a situation which is less than ideal that makes the CEO and CFO suddenly decide that actually wouldn't it be a good thing to have to focus on ESG?
Yes.
In ways, there's a ripple effect, but I would much rather be at the front end creating being provocative around ESG than to be told what to do. And for me, as a leader and as a commercial leader in any organization, it's around with our people and with our colleagues and making it real, making you feel it, starting to be part of the value set that you create in the organization.
Absolutely, yeah.
And then also so you create the buzz, you create the excitement, you create something special is happening over there, got to get a piece of that.
Yes, yeah.
The CEO and CFO said, I'd like to get a piece of it too, actually. Would you like some investment? So I think for me, there's several ways you can cut it. But for me, it's much better if you can get some real positive disruption within ESG, not just within procurement, but across the entirety of the organization, your marketing, your sales teams, your technologists as well. Because often within technology, the impact on ESG is huge.
Yes.
Just because it's in the cloud doesn't mean there's a cost.
Yes.
Right? And actually, in the cloud, it doesn't mean it's in the fluff. There's still a huge environmental impact to that.
Definitely.
And what I've seen there is great examples where you've got the Microsoft has got sinking data now into big submarines almost in lakes to keep.
Yes.
Yeah. So there's different ways, right? And I get excited about this, David. So forgive the long answer, be very short.
No, it's all good. Just to be provocative, as you've used a couple of times, right? In one of my roundtable events, there was a really interesting comment by one of the CPOs, and it sort of resonated really well, I think, across the group. And that was when they took up their most recent CPO-ship, they had their first meeting with the board, right? And they said, they were talking about the scope of the role and what was expected. And that particular CPO turned around and said, look, just to get this clear, my role here is not to save money. My role is to spend money, but spend it wisely and generate value, right? And actually that's really good, because when you look at that, it does give a very different perspective on the same story, right? And actually, one of the blocks for me that people have said previously around sustainability and ESG is, oh no, it's too expensive. To go sustainable is too expensive, right? And that's a massive myth. That's a massive myth, in my opinion. I'm not in the chair, you are, so I'm going to throw that hand grenade your way.
So listen, caught beautifully. Thanks very much. So I think that for me, social value and the creation of social value is something that you can have in abundance if you think about it in the right way. So, and having been blessed with being in procurement for more than a few years now, and having grown up in a sales and marketing environment where it's all around a different degree of measures and numbers, some soft and hard benefits and what have you, getting into procurement and realizing actually that you are dragged to a number when actually the number comes and looks after itself if you do the right things in the right way with the right people and the right partners. Right? So for me, this is a moment in time for the procurement leadership groups and supply chain specialists to kind of go, is there a moment to reposition the proposition?
Yes.
And for me, I don't believe you can work in isolation with ESG, procurement, supply chain. And actually, there's a real sense in my mind that the creation of a chief commercial officer directorate allows you then to go back to your very first point about how do you make it happen, to create the legitimacy in an organization that brings everything together, that aligns to the vision and the values of the organization.
Absolutely.
That also allows you then to drive a very different outward facing message to your supply base, where they too are struggling with ESG. But what you create then is an ecosystem where you learn from each other, and your speed to value is so much faster as a result of that.
Absolutely.
And you can create a great immediate local impact too.
No, I mean, I think that's spot on, right? I think the phrase that I sort of have in my head is sustainability, and particularly ESG, right, is no longer a nice to have. The time is now. It's got to be intrinsically part of the fabric of the business, the makeup of the balanced business scorecard, and actually the way to really embed it within the organisation is to make it part of their performance rewards.
Well, it's just you say that. So for me, this is table stakes now. This is not something very special. This is like the basics of running a business, right? The remuneration of the senior executive team, anchored around ESG and setting some really tangible outcomes. And I think, that I've had some experience where when you get questions from shareholders now, asking particularly, indeed, pointed questions, you kind of know why that is.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
And so being able to manage that dynamic as well with a really strong story puts you head and shoulders around other organizations that may not be there today.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean,
and I think the beauty of, if you're creating a startup today, you've got the opportunity to build something very different if you anchor with the ESG at the core.
Yes. Yeah.
And regrettably, because I've got 3 great kids, but they're the warriors for me now. That they hold me to account about what am I doing on my personal ESG agenda.
Absolutely.
Consumers of the future and today, and this whole digitization opportunity. So I think now is the time, but it's also the time to be considered about how you do it.
Yes, and it's it's exciting, right? Isn't it? Don't you think? I mean, I think it's really exciting that you can innovate. You can innovate for the greater good. You can innovate for long-term benefit. And when I'm talking about innovating, I'm talking not only about product innovation within manufacturing sites and manufacturing businesses, but I'm talking about innovating by bringing competitive businesses together, as you say, to start driving some consolidated agenda, right? You can leverage and you can drive a sustainability agenda. You can look at the environmental, the social, the governance piece and pull together. You're not competing against each other for that. You're driving a positive agenda.
So I think there's a couple of things, right? There's by definition, if procurement and supply chain are not being collaborative with the supply base and with the colleagues, then we've got a fundamental challenge in our hands.
Yes. Yeah.
Because maybe previously we'll have done all our various 5 porters analysis and everything else about leveraging this and tactical that and all these various phrases, but ultimately there's plenty to go around.
Yes.
So the way I think about this is, an ESG for me, having thought about how you could frame this to get colleagues excited, everyone's supporting goodness could be one way of starting to consider a program. But I go back a good few years and I was working with a rather large global organization, and I created a game-changing moment. I actually went to market and called it a game-changing moment. And that saw several competitors in a room together working through a solution for the greater good of the customer.
Yes.
Now that was a moment in time where you kind of go, wow, that's different. What that meant is that there was plenty for everybody.
Yes.
but it allowed us to do things very, very differently.
Mm-hmm.
We stripped away and we become a lot more efficient and a lot more effective.
Yeah.
And that was kind of, for me, the moment I went, right, we can do this. Now, that was a good few years ago, 10 plus, some would say.
Yeah.
A little bit ahead. But it's possible. And it just takes, sometimes you've got to make those big sort of bold moves.